Your baby inconsolably crying for hours on end. Well, this can be incredibly frustrating and can leave you feeling helpless. If you feel desperate to find something to be able to soothe your baby and nothing seems to work, it can be exhausting and overwhelming. And you're wondering what is wrong or what are you doing wrong and why does this keep happening? Well, first and foremost, you are not alone. Actually, colic affects 1 in 4 infants. And so 25% of infants experience colic. And while the medical community is still searching for answers, there is hope. So oftentimes, colic is considered unexplainable. And so it's unexplainable, inconsolable crying. And so, where can you go with a diagnosis like that that makes you feel like, what are our answers? And oftentimes, we look at a lot of digestive issues or reflux, things like that, but yet we're still coming up without results. And so in this video, I want to dive into a deeper issue where we can regulate to help restore balance and help support your baby, and hopefully lead you to a path of peace and of results that you're looking for. So, honestly, we see this often. It's common to see in our practice because oftentimes it takes going through something that makes you feel like you've tried everything and have come up without answers to seek out more holistic or alternative options. And so, oftentimes, when we talk about pediatric chiropractic or babies getting adjusted, one of the first things people say is kids can get adjusted, especially babies, because people's perception of what chiropractic looks like is their typical perception of an adult. And adjusting a baby is very different. And so there's not any pops or twists or cracks, anything like that. And so it's very different. That's oftentimes people don't even know that it's possible or it is an option. And so it leads having tried multiple different options or alternatives before landing into something alternative or holistic. And so oftentimes I get to see parents when they're in that position of feeling really hopeless and overwhelmed. And it's so cool because I get to come alongside and say that there is hope. And there's still hope. There's hope for your child. There's hope for you in whatever health issue you may be struggling with at the moment. There is hope. And so if you feel like the route you've taken has left you without answers for whatever you've been experiencing, know that you can continue to search for providers who are like minded and have answers and have solutions or guiding you on the right path with whatever you may be experiencing. And so it really is about diving into something deeper when it comes to colic. And something deeper for us as a neurologically based chiropractic office is the nervous system. And so, what do I mean by that? Well, when we look at colic through a neurological lens, we look at the symptoms and the root of the symptoms coming from nervous system dysfunction. And so, we're saying with the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system specifically, has two branches: fight or flight, which is stress, and rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic. And this controls literally resting and digesting. Less resting and digesting. So digestion, sleep, restoring, recovering, and repairing. And so this is this balance between this push and this pull, this gas pedal and this brake pedal. And so what happens is this is heavily influenced by what's called the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is one of the longest nerves in your body, and it goes directly from the brain to the gut. And this controls a big part of your parasympathetic or that rest and digest. And so when this system is out of balance and where our gas pedal is too high and we're not pushing the brake pedal, we have what we call nervous system dysregulation. And so this just means that there's an imbalance in the stress and in the relaxation. And so what can happen is this nervous system dysregulation is also known as dysautonomia. And this means that this fight or flight or the stress system has become overactive. And so this is really saying when we're overactive on the stress side, it means we're underactive on the rest and digest side. And so when it comes to something like colic, where we're seeing excessive crying, difficulty sleeping, digestive distress, all these hallmarks of colic, they're all going to be directly impacted by the parasympathetic nervous system. So when our video last week, if you want to watch it, it's why your detox isn't working or your diet isn't working. And it's because we talk about this pyramid where the base of the pyramid is the autonomic nervous system or the central nervous system. And so the base is regulating this stress response, because if we can't tap into the parasympathetic resting and digesting, then if we try to add reflex medication or we try to add probiotics for the gut or we try to do Miralax for constipation. It's a little bit further down the line, but essentially we keep on trying to treat all these things from top down when we haven't hit the foundation. And so if we aren't able to get out of that stress dominance, then we're not going to be able to properly rest and digest. And we know that in resting and digesting is when we repair, we regulate, and we restore. And so all of these things we can't do if we're stuck on this stress. And so all of the other approaches are very much so addressing the top. And while probiotics have a place and there's different things that are valuable, if we can't get into rest and digest, throwing probiotics at the gut is going to be it's out of order. And so we're going to come up feeling like we haven't achieved the necessary results or the outcome that we're looking for, and it's simply because we're going out of order. And so when we look at colic as a sign of this sympathetic dominance or this stress dominance, then we can say, okay, how do we regulate that? And as a neurologically based chiropractic office, that's what we focus on. But the big question we get is, especially since colic happens in infants, they're saying, well, how can my infant be stressed? Or where did stress come from for my infant? And that's a very common question, and it's totally normal because people often associate stress with the mental and emotional stress we experience as adults. And so when you're looking at a baby, you're wondering, well, they don't have a job, or they don't go to school, or they don't have a family life. All of these different things we're juggling as adults that kids, or especially an infant, isn't experiencing. So where are they getting stress to be stress dominant? And the answer to that is threefold. So first thing we have is we have physical stress. The physical stress is the actual birthing process. And so it's amazing how physical the actual birthing process is, especially on baby. But in a world where we're increasing medical interventions, we're increasing C-sections, we have about a 35% C-section rate. And we know that not all of those are medically necessary. And so that's going to obviously put more stress and tension on baby physically, where there are other interventions, whether that be forceps or induction or vacuum, etc. We know that we're throwing a lot more medical interventions at a process that already is physically strenuous on baby. And so that's when we know we're saying if there are more of these interventions, then we anticipate to see more physical stress or tension in baby's body. One of the most common areas we see tension in baby's body is in the head and the neck, and that's because they are physically pulled out by their head and their neck. And so infant torticollis, or when they get stuck to one side or have tension in their neck, is a frequent thing to notice early on because it's the first sign of that tension we're seeing in their head and their neck. So that's physical stress. The second thing we have is the mental and emotional component, and that's what we most commonly associate with the word stress. And mentally and emotionally, this is in utero, maternal mental and emotional stress actually affects babies. So maternal cortisol crosses the placenta. Cortisol is our stress hormone. So that's how maternal mental and emotional stress directly impacts a baby. Then on the other side, once baby is born, baby is co-regulating, baby is mirroring, and baby is directly feeding off of our mental and emotional stress. So depending on how regulated we are, we can see more of those that impact of the mental and emotional component, especially if it's a high risk pregnancy or different things were involved throughout pregnancy to increase mom's mental and emotional stress. And then the final thing we have toxins, which is environmental, anything in the environment that our body has to filter. And so this is really our overall toxic load. And this can be medications, antibiotics, diet, environmental stress. And some of these things serve a purpose. For example, with antibiotics, maybe there's ear infections, etc. There's different things that when we have antibiotics, they're great, but chronic use of antibiotics is going to further deplete the gut. And so, if an immune response is the problem and we're constantly on antibiotics, it's going to make us more susceptible because it's going to really impact our gut microbiome, where a lot of our immune system is housed. So that is to say, other things can be the medications. Oftentimes, colicky babies get put on reflex medications. And so there's different things like that where their body is just processing things out. Not that those things are, inherently bad on their own, but over time it contributes to what's called our toxic load. And so what being mindful of what is the toxic load that we're placing on our body. So those are the different areas. And so this all together we call the perfect storm. We have mom mentally and emotionally stressed out. We have a high risk pregnancy. We have an emergency C-section, a more traumatic birth, and then we mix that in with then we're starting to see frequent ear infections, etc. And now there's antibiotics, and this becomes this perfect storm and this swirling where it's all coming from a place where baby is stuck on this stress response. For example, so with colic, there may have been mental and emotional stress, mom mental and emotional stress, high risk pregnancy leads to potentially an emergency C-section or an induction that turns into an emergency C-section. And then we end up around, and then we have constipation and gas and a lot of food sensitivities. And that's that gut not working or not coming online because we're stuck in this stress response and we're really not able to tune into that rest and digest. And so these are some of the ways that really focusing and looking at the body from a neurological focus, especially as a neurologically focused chiropractor, this is how we're looking at the body. And so we're saying, how do we support baby from a foundation? And then we can work on all of things all the way up. But if we first regulate the foundation, everything can then thrive. So come on in to Sunlife Chiropractic. We have scans where we look at how balanced or regulated your baby's body is or your body. And we can see really where you're at and how we can come along and we can support you. So if you or someone you know has struggled with a baby with colic and is looking for answers, send this their way or comment if you like the video. Because it really is saying there needs to be something deeper and there needs to be more help and more support, especially in a time that can be also very vulnerable for mom mentally and emotionally. And so that can also be a big stressor on mom when baby's crying, baby's not sleeping, baby's inconsolable. It can be very challenging. And so we want to be able to come alongside and help support you on this journey. So I look forward to seeing you and scanning you and seeing how regulated your nervous system is.